Hello and welcome to the special support section of Melee's Turnwheel, the sub-series dedicated to discussing the many supports of the Fire Emblem series. I'm your host, I'm a Melee Kirby, and today we are taking a look at the Ostian characters in Fire Emblem The Binding Blade. So we have Wendy, Barth, Bors, Ogier, and Lillina. And we're going to be going through all these guys, talking about all their supports, and unpacking these characters a little bit because this game's got some good characters. I'm pretty sure that in other parts of the game that aren't Ostia, there are some good characters in there. So we have to talk about these guys to get to the good characters. No, I haven't read any of the supports yet. I kind of peeked. I'll give you guys a peek behind the curtain last episode and talked about how I'm recording this. And then I just pause the recording and go read the supports and then start the recording again and talk about them. So if it seems a little bit disjointed, that's probably why. But yes, I did just record the previous episode, SSS 6.2. I recorded that like 20 minutes ago. I went up, I made myself a sandwich, and then I sat back down and I started recording this one. So I might be a little bit low on energy. I might not do the whole recording in one sitting. We'll have to see. But I don't want to beat around the bush because I do want to get this done relatively quickly. So let's just go ahead and get started talking about these guys, starting with the one, the only, Gwendolyn, also known as Wendy. I'm going to be referring to her as Wendy because that is all I know her as. I would never call her Gwendolyn ever in a million years. So we're starting off on a bad note. We're gonna start from the bottom and hopefully work our way up. But I did something I don't usually do, and I just read through every single support for this character, and I can say conclusively that they are all fucking awful. Wendy has 5 support partners. She has Bors, Astolfo, Lillina, Barth, and Ogier. The only one that I would say is like close to passable is the Astolfo one. And I'm just gonna run through them real quick. There's really nothing to say about any of these. So the Boris support. Boris is her brother. You'd think that there'd be a great opportunity for some supports there. Maybe talk about their childhood. Maybe talk about their relationship a little bit. Like where, how much she looks up to him. Really just a well of content there to pull from. Instead, the C and B support are Wendy kind of just doing her thing, and Boris goes around and it keeps pretending like he's not following her, but is actually following her just to make sure that she's doing okay, which is sweet, right? That's all right. That's pretty characterful. I like that for Boris. It would have been great if it was the subject of one of their support levels instead of all 3 of them. And the A support, Wendy eventually just says, listen, you need to let me, be who I am. I'm a Knight of Ostia, and I want to be like you, so just leave me alone. She says it nicer than that, but then, of course, Boris says, man, I was being silly, and I should let her do her own thing. Now, it's just nothing. Like, it's just, like, that would already be a bad support if the C support was exactly what it was, and then the B support is where they had that conversation, and then the A support was like in more depth, maybe like why he's so worried about her. Maybe they have some kind of like backstory about that explains that, or maybe she comes to him and says, "Hey, I'm sorry that I was so mean to you." No, nothing. Like even if that was the case, I would still consider that like a pretty middle of the road support. But no, it's just fucking nothing. The Astolfo support is fine. It's a little bit of Astolfo backstory. Not even like any good Astolfo backstory. There's some good Astolfo backstory. We get some later on with his Igreen support, but for his Wendy support, it's just like he broke into Burn Castle once, I guess. Not really. It doesn't make a difference. It's pretty mundane. He calls her fat and she gets mad. That's funny. That's really funny, right, guys? It's very funny. It's a comedy. It's a good writing, good comedy. Is there anything in here worth talking about? No, the A support is like 4 lines long, and it's just her lecturing him about how bad of a knight he is. Alright, the Lillina support is next on the wiki, but I'm skipping that one. We're saving that one for last. Barth, so, I'm going to read to you all of Wendy's lines in the first 2 levels of the support. I'm not going to read the whole supports, I'm just going to read the Wendy's lines in the C and B Barth support, okay? Sir Barth, are you alright? Yes, of course. Yes. Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, I will. That is all that she says for the first 2 supports. And the Barth side of things isn't really much better. He's just, giving her lectures about, being a knight. And telling her that she needs to live up to her reputation, blah 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 blah, whatever. Generic bullshit. Now the A support is actually pretty long, and you'd think that oh, maybe they're actually going to do something here, but no. Barth says, "Hey, you're competent enough to be your own judge now. Basically, you can figure out for yourself where you need to pick up the slack." And Wendy just kind of keeps saying "Hey, isn't there anything that I can do better? Come on, give me some guidance." And then Barth says, "No, you can do it yourself." And then she gets sad because she thinks that he's gonna leave her and not, train her anymore. There might be a hint of some romance going on there. I don't know. But I don't care, frankly. But then he says, I'll still, we're still on the same side. We're still fighting together. I'll still be there. I'm just not gonna be right there trying to encourage you to pick up the slack or whatever. And then the final line of the support is hers. She does not to I don't want to give it not enough credit. She does have lines here, but I just think it's funny because the final line of the support is her saying yes. Just yes. And I think that's very funny. Okay, now we have the infamous OJ support. All right. I'm just gonna read to you the C support. Okay. I'm going to read you the C support, and then I'm not even going to bother talking about the other 2, because they're comparably terrible. But this is one of the funniest supports in all of Fire Emblem, so I'm going to read it anyway. C support. OJ. What are you doing, Gwendolyn? Gwendolyn. I'm practicing my walking. Walking? Why? For an armor knight, it's tough to get back up if you fall to the ground. You have to build strong legs to make sure that you will never fall. I see. The basics are everything, OJ. What are we doing here? Why did I decide to spend several years of my life on this fucking podcast? Is this what it's all about? Is this why we're here? Does anyone really want me to read the next 2 support levels of OJ and Wendy? Moving on. We're going to talk about the Lillina support. So this one, honestly, the C support and the B support are pretty good for kind of middle of the road for most other characters, but this had the potential to be her best support. The C support is her kind of bonding with Lillina a little bit. And she talks hey, you're striving to be like your brother, Wendy talks a little bit about what it means to her to be an armor knight, that sort of thing. That's good stuff. I like that. B support. Lillina tries to get her to, engage in a little girl talk, and Wendy is just not used to it. That's not really what she is interested in. She doesn't pay any thought. Lillina's asking her if there's any boys she likes, because they're a couple of girls around the same age and they live in the same area. So Lillina wants to be friends. But Wendy just doesn't really have much to say. So that's fair enough. Okay, cool. So we're seeing that relationship be established, deepened. They're kind of bouncing off of each other. Both of them have interesting things to say. It's cool. All right. We're getting somewhere with this, right? So you would think the A support, they kind of finally come into their own. They start bonding. They become friends. No, none of that. Lillina says, I just want to be friends with you. And Gwendolyn, I know I just said I would never call her Gwendolyn, but I'm just looking at the script right now, and it says Gwendolyn. Wendy says, no, I don't want you to be my friend. You're my lord. I serve under you. We can't be friends. And Lillina says, oh, okay. And then Wendy says, but I'll still talk to you. And Lillina's like, okay, that's cool. That's nice. Yeah. Thanks. That's it. That's the end of the support. Why? Why did they do this? Why would they have... They had a really solid thing going here. They had the C and the B support. All they had to do was just have them have a nice little friendly conversation in the A support. And I would have said, this support isn't fantastic or anything, but it's pretty good, and it's their best support, and it's alright. I like it. But no, they just had to subvert the... I mean, it's a generic, trajectory for a support, two characters getting to know each other, being friends. One of the characters is a little bit off-put because of the station difference, but eventually they come together and realize that they can have that kind of connection after all. But no, for some reason for this one, they really decided that Wendy was just going to say, fuck you, Lillina. I can't be your friend because I'm your knight. And I like, if that was the B support, that'd be pretty cool, and then the A support, they could maybe come to an understanding, right? Where maybe she realizes she was being a little, closed-minded, or Lillina tries to engage with her more in a way that Wendy is more comfortable with. That could have been cool. No, she just doesn't. It's just, no, we can't be friends. Whatever. Ugh. I can't say for sure. We're only, how many, this is the 9th character we've talked about. I can't say for sure. But I'm pretty confident in saying that Wendy is my least favorite character in Fire Emblem The Binding Blade. And yeah, she's just horrible. There's just no good supports here at all. The Astolfo one is okay for Astolfo, and that's it. There's really nothing else. So I'm gonna move on. When am I doing Astolfo? Hold on, let me double check something. Okay, so we have a little bit of a problem here. I planned out all the SSS episodes. I know who I'm going to be talking about, in what order. I'm only going to be talking about a character once they show up in the main episodes. So, we're not going to be talking about, like, Echidna for a while, or until after the next episode comes out. We're not going to be talking about Corel, obviously, until towards the end. Stuff like that. I forgot to put Astolfo anywhere on here, so I'm probably just going to throw him in somewhere. I don't think I want it to be this episode, though. I'll probably... Yeah, okay, no, I know where I'm going to do it. Alright, yeah, that's fine. It's not this episode, but we'll talk about him in a couple episodes. So, yeah, that's Wendy. Wendy sucks. Let's move on to... Let's do Boars next, I guess. Let's talk about Mr. Boars. Boars has 5 support partners. He has Wendy, who we've already seen, Ogier, Barth, Lillina, and Astolfo. So all the characters we're already talking about this episode, except for Astolfo. So we've already seen the Wendy one. Really boring. I guess for Boars, it's slightly better for Boars than it is for Wendy. It just shows that he's a little bit of a doting older brother who is overprotective of his sister to a fault. And by the end, he realizes that he was being a little bit silly, and kind of leaves her to do her own thing. That's pretty cool. Nice bit of character growth for him there, I guess. Not terrible, just not particularly interesting. If that was like Wendy's worst support, and it was among like way better ones, then I wouldn't really mind it. It's fine, it's serviceable. But unfortunately for Wendy, it is probably like one of her better ones, to be honest. But anyway, for Boris, let's hope that is the worst of the lot. And move on to talk about his Astolfo support. Alright, his Astolfo support is fucking excellent, and we're already off to a great start. I'm starting to have a feeling that Astolfo might be one of the better characters in the game. Just a little bit of a hunch, because this support is genuinely fantastic. Well, first of all, Astolfo is drunk for the whole thing, and if you know how GBA supports work, all the supports take place during battle, and Boris even brings that up. He says, hey, are you drinking? And he says, Astolfo, we're in the middle of a battle. And, the first one is more of a comedy one, although obviously I would assume that most people would be off-put by the fact that this guy is drinking. They clearly aren't playing that for comedy, at least it doesn't seem like it to me. The B support, they go into a little bit more depth, and Astolfo just kind of starts putting a lot of shit that's happened on him. He says, I could have saved Lord Hector if I had given him better information. I could have prevented the rebellion. There wasn't anything I could do about it, but I knew it was happening. Like, it was pretty obvious that it was going to happen, and I'm just a useless spy, and I'm terrible. And Boris doesn't really have a lot to say in this. In fact, he does say it is not your fault, but Astolfo just ignores him. But Boris doesn't really do anything. Boris actually brings up the fact that there are others watching, and is honestly like really uncomfortable. Like, I think even if you don't know anyone who's struggled with alcoholism, I think that we all kind of know. We've all had that moment, I think, where we just see someone do something really embarrassing in public, and you just kind of feel bad for them. And here, seeing Boris say like there are other people watching really kind of stirred that up in me of like, yeah, he's definitely suffering. He's definitely going through a lot right now. So, it's sad. And then his A support, he's still drunk. But Boris decides to go all in anyway and just say like, we need to move forward. This responsibility was, it's all of ours, not just yours. I find that interesting. He says responsibility lies with all of us. He doesn't say nobody or like no one could have seen this coming. He puts the blame on everyone equally, which I think is an interesting distinction. And then says, we need to move forward. And he considers Astor a knight of Ostia, even though technically he's not a knight. He's just a spy. But Boris considers him a loyal ally and worthy of being considered a knight, regardless, which I think is really nice. So pretty good support there, mostly for Astor, but I do like it for Boris as well. So anyway, next is his Lillina support. So this support is good. I would say mostly for Lillina. Boris definitely seems to be playing the supporting character in his support so far. No pun intended. He is definitely more of like he's the sounding board for other characters to kind of bounce off of. At least in these first few. But I like this one a lot. Again, mostly for Lillina. Basically, Lillina. It's kind of funny at first because Lillina's annoyed with him and doesn't want to admit it. But then later, kind of confesses like, "Hey, I'm really thinking about Roy recently. He seems like he's getting so grown up and moving away from me, and I just kind of miss what we used to have." And Boris kind of like gives her some comfort and says like he's still the same Roy that you once knew, even if he's changed a little bit. And then in the A support, Lillina seems to have realized her mistake and has grown from it. And Boris, Boris says, that he's gonna stay with her. It's pretty good. Boris is a nice guy. He's helping her out, and being a nice person for her to come to in a moment of need, which I think is awesome. Next up, we have Barth. Barth's support is pretty simple. It's nothing fancy. They just, Barth is kind of deep in his feelings about, we'll start at the beginning. So the C support, Barth talks about the arena. He's been going there to train. Boris kind of scolds him and says, like, I don't approve of that. It seems a little bit unknightly. But Barth says, hey, whatever helps me get stronger. And the B support, they talk about Hector dying and how, Barth would very much be the type who wanted to go out and join him, but also felt like he had a responsibility to stay in Ostia to help Lillina. I'm going to move my mic a little bit closer. I had to adjust where I was sitting, so now I feel like I'm going to be really quiet, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, and then they talk a little bit. They give some exposition about how they're friends. And then the A support, they kind of go into each other's reasonings for wanting to become armor knights. Boris, we'll focus on Boris here. He says that he wanted to protect the people he loved with the armor. So he did it for the people he cares about, which is as good a reason as any. Whereas Barth says he did it because he wanted to be one of the strongest fighters. He believes that no one can match a an armor knight 1-on-1, which is hysterical. But we'll assume that it's true, like in universe, or at least he thinks it's true. But then he kind of reflects like, well, maybe that's true, but I still couldn't protect Lillina when it came down to it because it wasn't 1-on-1. There was a bunch of them, and I couldn't do it. And he kind of laments that he's not strong enough. Pretty basic stuff. It's nothing that incredible, but it's all right. It's a decent support for sure. Next up is his Ogier support, and it's a good one. I would say not bad. In fact, I think this is his last one. It's all right. It's decent. He meets in the C support is them meeting for the first time because I guess Boris was out of Ostia for a while, and Ogier was knighted within that time frame. So when he comes back, they're meeting for the first time, and then B support they kind of just reminisce about a time that Boris beat Barth, and it kind of turns into a lesson about how you shouldn't fight just to fight. You should have a reason behind what you do, because just mindlessly fighting isn't productive. It's not going to get you anywhere. And so Ogier kind of takes that to heart, and in the A support he kind of says, hey, I don't really have a cause. I became a mercenary because I needed money to feed my family. And Boris says, well, that's a cause. It doesn't have to be this huge grand thing, like protecting your country or saving the world, to use his examples. It can be something as simple as wanting to feed your family. In a way, that's kind of what Boris is doing, right? Because we found out in the Barth support that he became an armor knight so that he could protect the people he cares about. And I can't think of a better way to protect somebody than to make sure that they're able to eat. So they're pretty similar in that regard. It's nice. It's a nice little support. I think it's a good moment for Boris being kind of a mentor in a way that I think would have been really cool to see with Wendy, but it just doesn't happen. So the Ogier support kind of filling that need, I think, is good. Overall, that was his last support, and overall, I think Boris is a pretty alright character. Nothing really noteworthy. He has a couple good supports, a couple bad supports, but generally, I think he's a nice guy. I like his kind of take on what it means to be a knight, and yeah, I mean, there's not really a whole lot else to say. He's kind of a middle of the road character, I'll say. He's fine. He's fine. All right. We'll do Barth next, because why not? Barth has 5 support partners, and it's just all the Ostia people again. So we're going to go through the ones we've already talked about. The one with Wendy is really bad. I think that it's better for him than it is for Wendy, because all the supports are better for the other character than they are for Wendy. But basically, I think you can generously say that it says something about his character that he's willing to kind of like teach Wendy kind of like all these lessons, and then at one point he realizes that he needs to go hands off and just let her figure it out, because she's not going to get anywhere if he just keeps giving her direction the entire time. She needs to be able to manage on her own, but is still obviously her comrade and is there for her. So that's all right. He's fine in that support. And the Boris one we've already talked about. Nice for him. Pretty generic, just like, oh, I want to get stronger. I need to be the strongest. I do like his thought about how he's, armor knights are the strongest one-on-one fighters, but that doesn't really mean anything when you're up against like a legion of enemies. So I appreciated that observation, but past that, it was a pretty mediocre support, I would say, for Barth. Now, next, we'll talk about Astolfo. So the Astolfo support is interesting. It's just them being a couple of, like, paranoid war vets. That's maybe a little bit harsh, but basically, the C support is good because they were both really rocked by what happened to Hector and the ensuing rebellion, and they both really put a lot of blame on themselves. So you can see maybe compared to Boris, Barth is kind of enabling this perspective. In fact, interestingly, when Barth says, what does he say? The betrayals in the Alliance and Lord Hector's death, we are all to blame for that. So he's not even saying like, oh, it's my fault. He's immediately saying we, which I just think is funny. And you can see kind of where Astolfo is getting these ideas reinforced from. And then the B support and onward to the A support are just them saying like, is there a traitor in the army? We gotta like suspect our comrades and like look into all of them. Astolfo's doing like some spy work. Their first and most obvious suspect is Guinevere, because she is from Bern, of course, so that makes sense. Astolfo does some digging and decides that she's innocent. And then that's pretty much it. He says like, I'll we have some pretty strong bonds, but in case anyone new shows up, I'll keep an eye on them. So I don't know how I feel about this. It doesn't really feel like there's any kind of like moral or lesson here. Or like none of the characters feel like they've grown at all at the end of it. They're just kind of like, I don't know. It's just weird to me. I'm not a big fan, but it's fine. I guess it's a decent filler support. Definitely Astolfo's worst one so far. Next is the Lillina support. Barth basically just talks to Lillina about Ostia and how the rebellion happened, and I don't really have anything to say about this. It's just the B support talks a little bit about Debius and Legance, but doesn't really go into any detail about them, just that they were kind of scummy, and Lillina feels like she put too much trust in them, and I don't know. It's fine. Maybe I'm just getting a little bit too tired, but this support doesn't really stand out to me at all. So I'm just going to move on. Especially like for Barth. Like for Lillina maybe a little bit, but definitely not for Barth. So we can talk more about it when we get to Lillina. Okay, so this one's a decent comedy support. So Barth comes up to OJ and says, "Why are you not an armor knight?" And OJ says, "Well, I don't think I'd be able to handle the heavy armor." And Barth says, "Well, you need to train harder so that you can handle the heavy armor." And so they just spend the entire support like getting real swole and training and pushing themselves really hard. And then at the end, he's like, "Yeah, so you'll make a great mercenary." And OJ's like, "Wait, I thought you wanted me to be an armor knight." And Barth says, "Well, I just kind of said that to motivate you." And that's basically it. So it's a fine support. If it was, again, it's one of those where it's like, if it was among better supports, I would be fine with it as like a pure comedy option, but it's just not. It's not really among better company. Most of the Barth supports are just not all that good. Yeah, I don't like Barth very much. I think Barth is a very mediocre character. We already talked about the Wendy one, right? Yeah, we did already talk about the Wendy one. Okay, so yeah, we can move on from Barth. Barth's mediocre. I don't really have any strong feelings about him. Next up is OJ. Okay, so for the first time in a while, we actually have a character involved in the supports that is not from Ostia. So OJ has 5 support partners: Boris, Barth, Wendy, who we've already seen, Lillina, and then also Lalum or Larum, the dancer, who we're gonna see in the next main episode. So let's start with the ones we've already seen, as usual. The Boris support is nice. I think it's a good learning opportunity for OJ. He's kind of like new, fresh out of the academy knight who's like kind of lacking a purpose, or at least he feels like he is, until Boris kind of says like, what you have is purpose, even if it doesn't necessarily seem that way. So I think that's cool. The Barth support is, again, a decent comedy support, but nothing really to write home about. I guess I'll talk about the Wendy support if I have to. The B support is literally just the same as the A support, except OJ is swinging his sword. He also wants to retrain himself in the basics. The basics are everything. And then the A support, they just kind of enter into a little bit of a rivalry. And Wendy kind of says like, "Oh, thank you for being my rival to motivate me." and that's it really. So it's nice. It's like kind of sweet, I guess, but it's just so boring. There's just really nothing to say about it. So let's move on to the more interesting ones. Well, hopefully more interesting ones. I guess we'll see. So we'll start with the Lillina support. Okay, so yeah, this support is definitely a little bit more interesting. First of all, Ogier expounds a little bit on something we already know, I think, from his Boar support, where he explains that he's from a poor family, and he is working to make money to send back to them so that they can feed themselves. And they talk about he mentions he has brothers, and then Lillina asks about if he has any sisters, and Ogier says, "Yeah, I did have a sister. I don't remember her very well, but I sure did have one." And despite talking in the past tense and saying that he doesn't remember what she was like, Lillina doesn't seem to pick up the hint. So in the beast support, she just starts asking about her, like, "Oh, how's she doing? What's her name? Tell me about her." And he's like, "Lillina, she's not around anymore. I guess because their family was so poor, they had to give her away, basically, because if they didn't, then they all would have just starved. Because I guess the logic is that at least the boys can grow up to work, whereas the girls don't really have much of a place in the working class. A little bit I think that's definitely true, like historically. In Fire Emblem it's a little bit different, since we've seen that, like, at least in terms of like armies, they're equal opportunity employers. Women and even children get hired to fight in armies all the time. So that one's a little bit, that's nitpicking, but I do think it's a little bit hard to justify that in a game like Fire Emblem, but it is what it is. Yeah, and then Lillina just kind of resolves to make Ostia a place where all the children can be happy, and this kind of runs into this is an unavoidable problem, and I am gonna bring a little bit of my own politics into this. I am, in case anyone hasn't picked up on it, I don't really like talking about politics very much, because I don't think every conversation needs to have politics inserted into it, and I just don't really enjoy talking about it because it makes me kind of sad or annoyed or angry or whatever you want to call it, but sometimes I think it's worth talking about, so I'll go ahead and it might come up on a main episode as well, but I am generally speaking a very left-leaning individual, so you might notice that I have a few left-skewed political ideals and ideas about how the government should be run and all that stuff, especially about like our economic system. The reason I'm bringing all this up is because it's always funny to me in supports like this, where especially if it's involving so the characters in Fire Emblem are almost always like, there's a ton of princes and princesses and lords and knights and all these guys, and there will always be like a couple people who are like, "Yeah, my family's so poor that we're all starving to death," and the lord is like, "Oh, that's so sad, but you're such a hard worker making sure that your family can eat." And it's like, okay, maybe instead of living in your fucking mansion, your fucking castle with your billion slaves, I guess not slaves, they're like, they're servants. Maybe send some money or some food to make sure. How much food do you think Lillina wastes every single day? How much food do you think that her servants make her breakfast in the morning, and she's like, "Oh, this is really good. But they burnt the toast a little bit, so I'm not going to eat it," and she just throws it away. So it's just funny to me, and I think it tries to like this is, I will say, I don't necessarily think, in fact I'm pretty happy that they don't try to like analyze the socioeconomic implications of like every interaction in Fire Emblem. That's fine. I don't really care that much. It's just always something that I'm thinking about, especially more recently. I have a lot of ever evolving thoughts on this sort of thing, and it's just funny to me to think about, like, Lillina, you can help him you can help his family, make his family not starve anymore. I don't know. Maybe it's not as feasible as I'm making it sound, but doesn't matter, I guess. Okay, soapbox over. The last character that he has to support with is Lalum, so let's read that one. Okay, so the Lalum support is just a cute little comedy support about how he accidentally comes across her while she's dancing, and he's like, oh, that's pretty cool, you have a nice dance, and then they go back and forth, and she basically is like, I have a really special dance, you want to see it? And he's like, yeah. Like kind of implying like she's like it's implicitly sexual, which is uncomfortable because she's like 16, but so is he, I guess, so it's fine, whatever. And yeah, they go back and forth about that a little bit, and it's cute, it's funny, I'll take it. Pretty decent set of supports from Ogier. Not a bad character by any means. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter until we talk about Lillina anyway, but I would say Boars is still my favorite, and that's not saying a lot. As I said, he's very middle of the road, but he's OJ isn't too much better. I'll say that much. But anyway, we'll go ahead and talk about Lillina now, and Lillina will almost certainly end up being the best character this episode. But I guess we'll have to see. So let's go ahead and jump into her supports. Okay, this is gonna take a while. Lillina has a whopping 10 support partners. That is a really high number. So there's the 4 we've already seen. OJ, Boars, Barth, and Wendy. And then she also has one with Roy, of course. We've actually already seen the Marcus support from last episode. The Astor, there's an Astor or Astolfo conversation. And then she has one with Gonzalez, Cecilia, and Garrett, all of whom are characters who we have not yet met. So I'll quickly run through the 4 we've seen already. Her one with Boris, I think, is good for her because I think it's cute, to have her worrying about something so, I guess, mundane is the wrong word. But I appreciate that the writers of Fire Emblem 6 let their kids and teenagers act like kids and teenagers, and they worry about very kid and teenager things. Like Lillina is 13 or 14, and I think a lot about Leaf, and one of my main criticisms of Leaf in that game is that he was basically just a small adult, and he made some stupid choices, but like he was basically an adult, and the game didn't really, it didn't really treat him, I guess, like a normal teenager, which is fine. It's how they chose to write the game. It's whatever. But here I do think that Shanna is a good example of this, but I think Lillina is another really good example of this. Is like she's, her dad is dead, and she has the potential of, she has to rule over an entire big territory, and that territory also happens to be basically the ruling territory of an entire country, and she's worried about the boy she likes, being a little bit too grown up, and being able to button his shirt now, and she remembers him as being such a kind of immature little kid, and now he's growing up, and she feels like he's leaving her behind, and that's just such a human, personal conflict that I really enjoy, and I think that this is one of the things that supports really excel at, because we have like the big grand scale conflict of like the world is in danger, or maybe like different conflicting ideals, or hatred and prejudice being a big factor in decision making. That's all stuff that you can tackle in the main story of these games. But I feel like the supports are really great for analyzing the small personal conflicts of these characters. And this is a really good example of that. So I'm a big fan of the Boris support. And holy shit, I spent like 5 minutes talking about the Boris support, which you've already talked about. So I'm going to move on now and talk about the other ones. The Barth support is okay. Lillina learning how to, like, be a good leader. OJ is her kind of getting a motivation to, be a leader that helps her people. Wendy is her getting, like, acquaintance zoned. What would be the word for this? She wants to bond with Wendy, but Wendy says no, and Lillina's like, okay. That's the end of the fucking support. Yeah, so the rest of them are okay. I think out of the Ostian characters that we've seen, I think the Boars one is definitely the most interesting. For Lillina at least. And then we don't really need to talk about this at all, but the Marcus one is also pretty good. I think it's cute for similar reasons. She's acting like a teenager. She's acting like someone who is curious about the boy she likes, and getting legitimate romantic advice from Roy's, like, retainer, who's like a 70-year-old man. It seems like, or like a 60-year-old man. I don't know. It's cute. I like it. Okay, so the next one we'll talk about is Astor. So more evidence for Astolfo being the best character in the game. We'll have to see how that pans out. But honestly, all these supports are just so fucking good. This is really a How I Met Your Father kind of story. But basically, he is recounting the story of how he first met Hector. And it's a really nice story. He snuck into Ostia Castle. Hector caught him, and instead of, like, doing anything about it, Hector basically offered him a job on the spot. And Astor actually tried to run away. And he did. He successfully escaped. Hector didn't even try to stop him. But when he got out and he kind of, like, wandered around for a while, eventually he ended up finding himself back at Ostia Castle and deciding to take Hector up on his job offer. And it's a nice little story. Doesn't give a whole lot of, like, character development or anything. I wouldn't even say it's, like, significantly interesting backstory. It's just a fun little story. I like it. All right, I'm going a little bit out of order, so I'm actually not sure who's next. We're saving Roy for the end again, and instead we will talk about... so we'll do Gonzalez. Gonzalez is next. Let's read his support real quick. So the Gonzalez support is... so Elephant in the Room, it is implicitly romantic, and that's weird, because she's, like, 14, and Gonzalez is... I have no idea how old Gonzalez is. He's definitely a grown man, though. Now, I don't know if this makes it better or worse, but Gonzalez is, like, very, to be blunt, he has, like, a very severe intellectual disability. He's like a caveman. He barely even speaks properly, so he's probably got the mind of a child. I don't necessarily know if that makes it better or if it is about the same, or maybe it even makes it a little worse, but who knows? I'm not gonna make any judgments on that, but it is definitely a little weird. However, I do like the support. I think it's pretty sweet. Now Gonzalez, for context, I think context is important in the support. Gonzalez is a character who you recruit in one of the chapters by talking to him with Lillina, and basically she stops him from going to destroy a village. He's being manipulated by the bad guys because he's just kind of a brute who kind of does whatever he's told. And so she talks to him and says, "Hey, why are you doing this?" And he's like, "Well, I just got to follow orders." And she talks him out of it, basically. So I think that's important to understand kind of the what's going on here a little bit. The C support and B support are pretty straightforward. They're just kind of talking, like, doing nice things for each other. And then Lillina brings up Roy, and, Gonzalez realizes that she might have feelings for him, and then decides to take off because it seems like he's developing feelings for her. And then the A support, they kind of hash it out a little bit, like, they're both crying, like, and Gonzalez is just so grateful that Lillina helped keep him human. Like, he's so down on himself, and it's a pretty consistent theme throughout his supports, from what I remember. And I'm getting a little bit into Gonzalez territory, so we'll focus on Lillina. But I think, she's able to reach this man in a way that no one has before, and I think that he really values that. and I think it ended up causing him to fall in love with her. And by the end, it seems like the feeling is mutual. She explicitly says, "I want to stay with you," which I think is about as explicit as you're gonna get most of the time. But it's weird for sure. Like I don't want to unpack all of what's going on there. It's creepy for sure. But if you just kind of like sweep that under the rug real quick, it's a pretty nice support. It's sweet. I enjoy them together. I think they have good chemistry. Not they came out wrong. I think they bounce off of each other well. They're a couple of cool characters. I like them. Okay, next is Cecilia. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. The Cecilia support is pretty mundane. I actually forgot, frankly, that Cecilia was Lillina's teacher as well as Roy. And she kind of teaches her a few lessons over the course of their support chain. The first one being a lesson on like how to entrust people with certain tasks and responsibilities. Basically, Lillina says, "Hey, you didn't teach Roy magic. Why is that? Why didn't you teach him any magic? He wanted to learn magic, but you just didn't teach him." And Cecilia explains, "Well, I recognize that he wouldn't be any good at it." Basically, I guess you need to have an innate talent for magic. And Roy could work hard at it and do well. But he wouldn't be like the best around or anything like that. He didn't have that innate strength in magic. And Lillina did. And she felt like if I taught him magic, then he's going to get discouraged by the fact that he's trying harder and harder and harder and just isn't getting anywhere. So, recognizing people's strengths and weaknesses and being able to work around those, is an important part of being a teacher and just a leader in general. So, neat idea there. I like that. Actually, that was the B support. I forgot the C support was just basically nothing. So we're just going to skip straight to the A support, which is, basically they talk about Roy and how he's grown. Lillina says, like, "I want to be like Roy one day, but I couldn't even recognize that there was a traitor in my own castle. How could I be like Roy?" And Cecilia says, "Well, I've been there. I also struggled a lot, and I've only made it this far because of the people I've had to support me. And you can rely on people to support you as well." And Lillina kind of takes that to heart. And that's the end of the support. So it's not really anything too crazy, but it's all right. Decent support. So next up we have her Garrett support, and this is a lot more, I think, interesting for Garrett than it is for Lillina. Garrett is a character who we're not going to see for a long time, at least another few main episodes. But Lillina recruits him. He's a bandit, kind of similar to Gonzalez, although definitely more. He's smarter for sure. And basically, it's just Lillina being unflappably kind and genuine and caring in the face of a guy who just doesn't get it. He's a very... he joined the army, right? So he's not like... Lillina was able to talk him out of banditry, so he's not like a terrible person, but he's not a nice guy, and he definitely makes it clear to Lillina that, like, I'm a jerk, I'm just gonna do what I want, and I'm here for the money, and you're so gullible, and you're so naive. And Lillina's just not, doesn't have any problems with that. She's just like, yeah, you're a nice guy, I trust you completely, I think you're better than you give yourself credit for. And then the A support ends with her doing something nice for her, but kind of trying to pretend like he didn't, which is fun, and I like that. Not really a whole lot going on here for Lillina, other than, it obviously demonstrates her strength of character. She's a really, really good person, and that is made very clear through the support. But past that, it's really all there is to it. So we can go ahead and end that one there, and let's talk instead about Roy. Her Roy support. This ought to be fun. So this is pretty much the closest thing that Roy has to a canon love interest. She very explicitly has feelings for him, both in this support as well as other supports, like in the Marcus support, and then also like parts of the main story. So it's not surprising that they have like a romantic support here. It's not actually super explicit, even at the very end, although it's pretty heavily implied that they have feelings for each other. And it's cute, Lillina spends some time reminiscing about the past and how things, will never be like they used to be, and feeling kind of sad about that. But saying, well, I guess, I'm just being silly. But then Roy says, there will be one thing that is always the same, and that's the fact that I'm by your side, and we're going to be together forever. It's sweet. It's nice. And I would say not my favorite Roy support. I still think the Shanna one clears it, but this one's pretty good too. I do like it. And of course, if you have any interest in doing the canon pairing, that would be this one, for sure. I mean, I guess canon in quotes. But like this is definitely the most push love interest. It's like, I'd say it's comparably canon to like Ellawood Ninian, where it's like, yes, technically he could marry Lynn, or what was the other one, Fiora, but it's probably going to be Ninian. And just like this, Roy can marry Sue or Lalum or Shanna, but it's Lillina. Like, we all know this, right? So hopefully it's not too controversial. Anyway, that's all for Lillina, and that is all for our Ostian characters, except of course for Astor, who we're going to be doing in a different episode. So next episode, we're going to be dropping back down to 4 characters again. We're going to be doing mostly the characters from the orphanage in chapter 3. So we have Chad and Lou, and then a character we have not yet met named Ray. By the time that episode comes out, the main episode where we meet Ray will have come out as well. So, and then finally Kath, who is not related to any of those guys, but I needed to put her somewhere, and she's not related to any of the other characters. So, hell yeah. So look forward to that. We're not going to be seeing that one for a while, I don't think, but yeah. So, but keep an eye out for the next main episode, if that's not already out yet. And then I plan to do a bonus episode about Engage at some point. I don't know when, but I do plan to get that out sometime soon-ish. Just giving my overall thoughts. I already explained this in the last one, so I'm not going to get into too much detail, but yeah. Have a good rest of your day, guys, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.